So right on cue, that was the message. So the topic for this evening is the new normal, the hybrid approach. And I'm really delighted to be able to introduce tonight's speaker, which is Audrey Philpott, who is the Employee Relations and Engagement Lead at Repsol Sinopec, and also a long-standing member of our branch committee as well. Before getting into the event properly, I'm going to just give you a quick update on some up-and-coming events and activities that we've got. So first of all, really immediately, the CIPD Scotland team are tomorrow hosting an inaugural learning and development networking event to look at how L&D is working in a new working models. This is between 1 and 2 and is on MS Teams. If you'd like to participate in that, you can sign up through the CIPD Scotland part of the website. Moving on to the 16th of November at 7 o'clock, the branch will be having its regular book clubs, which is led by Judith MacDonald, meeting online. And this month's book will be Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. All are welcome to attend. If you'd like to join us, just drop an email to the branch and we'll send you the Zoom link for it. Moving on after that, we are on the 30th of November at 6 o'clock. We've got another online event, which is Your Future in the HR Profession. And our speaker for this event is Sarah Beaumont, the Director of HR from Hunter Adams, who's going to provide her insights into the future of the HR profession. Obviously, so much has happened since the pandemic, which has had a huge impact on HR professionals. And Sarah will be providing insights based on what the HR consultants have experienced from the front line at Hunter Adams. We'll include some case studies of good practice as well. Then moving on to the 9th of December, this time at 7 o'clock, we have another online event entitled Getting the Most from Your Teams. Is it a people or a process problem? And our speakers for that event are Judith Thorpe, one of the founders of TMM Recruitment, and she'll be joined by Cheryl Newman, the founder and CEO of Appetite for Business. And together they're going to discuss how to get the most from your teams, looking at both the people and process issues. So we've got quite a few events coming up, opportunities to hear from local practitioners with in-depth experience and insights on some very topical issues, as well as a chance to connect with other members in the branch area. So we're really hoping there's something in there for everyone. But returning back to tonight's events, the new normal and the hybrid approach, as I say, I'm absolutely delighted to hand over to Audrey, who's going to reflect on Repsol Sinopec's journey of implementing hybrid working. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Audrey. I think she's going to speak for around about 35 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. So over to you, Audrey.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for your intro. So many of you might know me, but for those of you who don't, I look after employee relations and engagement at Repsol Sinopec, which is an operator within the North Sea. And I decided to talk about and reflect on our implementation of hybrid working, a model which we decided would suit us as an organisation. And I'll talk about that shortly. But before I do, I would just like to reflect on a pretty interesting, I found it to be a pretty interesting statistic, which Accenture gave us, which shows that a majority of workers, so 83% of the workforce, would prefer a hybrid workplace model going forward. And I guess what I've said here is, while some of us are excited to be back in the office, others prefer to continue working remotely. And I'll talk a bit about the experience from our organisation shortly. But what I would point out is, and I talk about this throughout my discussion tonight, organizations, as they prepare to open up their offices, managing the transition can become the trickiest part. And we've certainly found that also. So before I get into why we chose to do hybrid working, I should tell you a little bit about the the team who implemented it. So it wasn't just a HR thing, it was a bunch of folks from around the organisation, representative of the organisation. So we had members from the HSE team, members from the engineering team, operations, our comms team, our facilities team. And so between us, we managed to come up with a model based on a number of things. So in 2019, our survey said, and certainly in 2020 as well, we want more flexibility. And I guess subsequently the working world changed. As part of the 2021 employee value proposition strategy, we introduced the hybrid working option to office-based employees. Of course, we've got a bunch of folks that work in our offshore sites as well. We've got about 10 sites, but the hybrid model wasn't something that would work for those employees. But for our office-based employees, we felt that the hybrid model would be one that would suit. And so what did it look like for us? Our hybrid model offers employees the option to work 3 days in the office with 2 what we call anchor days of Mondays and Wednesdays. So Mondays and Wednesdays, we make it obligatory for people to be in the office. Obviously, there would be exceptions to that where people have different flexible working or where there may be a need for some discretion. But we launched this and we implemented this in October, early October. And so now we're going on a month and a bit. And yeah, on the whole, it's going really well. So for us, we decided that we would launch it on a 12-month trial basis because we felt that by putting in a trial, we might take the time during that time to gain feedback from the employees. And so we've got about over 500 employees who work under this model. Prior to going into this model, we had a bit of a transition anyway. And back in June, we started what we called a rotational return. And so that was working, and I guess, in a COVID environment. And we continue to do so. Obviously, the measures that we put in place then are still largely in place now. So what we did was a rotational return where the office-based workforce was split into 3 teams, Team A, Team B, Team C. And each team worked Monday to Friday of a week. So week 1 was Team A, Monday to Thursday, should I say. The Friday was assigned as a deep clean. So Team A was week 1, Team B week 2, and so on. So that worked really well because it gave us an opportunity to allow people to get used to being back in the office. And it was only really 4 days out of 15. So it led nicely into commencing the hybrid model. And what I would say is there is no one size fits all, and I'll talk about that later. And obviously other forms of flexible working are available in our organization. And what I would say as well, obviously it varies for part-time workers and we include PAYE workers in that as well. And for those working under a contract for services, we would that would depend on their own organization's policy. And so how did we prepare for hybrid working? As I said, the new ways of working team, as we were called, were already formed. And in fact, we addressed the COVID matters throughout the time from March of 2020. We were already formed and normed, and really performing really well as a group. So we had, because of the representation within the group, we had good experience and expertise to help to shape what the hybrid working model would be. One of the key aspects that we felt was important to us was communication and engagement. Our CEO really focuses on consistent messaging and a message of care. So that was weaved through our communications for hybrid working. We created an induction to the office. So as you can understand, people were out of the office for a significant period, so we needed to reorientate them into the office. And obviously, we also had a bunch of people who hadn't been to the office before, having started in the period that in the previous, say, 20 months when people weren't working in the office. When we had the rotational return, we introduced a meet and greet. So on day one of each week 1, week 2, week 3, we'd meet and greet. So we'd members of the New Ways of Working team from a socially distanced basis, stand outside the building as people were entering. And the feedback was that the friendly smile and the human face after such a long time of being out of the office really helped. And we got some initial feedback from people, because we knew at that stage, because we had done some surveys and some other, and we used the other engagement channels as well to understand how people felt. And that ranged, and certainly a lady who's spoken to us many times before, Caroline Taylor, prior, and I'll speak about this shortly, she did a piece of work to try and help people, to help their understanding and help to normalize their feelings prior to and during their return to the office. So we understood that there was a range of emotion as people were coming back to the building, and in terms of, and not just emotion, but responsibility. So a change of venue, and travel has been reintroduced. You have to wear office-based clothes now instead of a really nice work top and perhaps your pajamas on the bottom. You have to put on makeup if you feel that that's important for you. And so a lot of things changed. Even, you know, one of a key concern was dog walkers. A lot of people, as you know, during COVID may have bought a pet. So there's a huge responsibility to attach to that. So a whole change of responsibility resulted. So a massive transition, as I mentioned earlier. We obviously have introduced it on a trial basis. So we haven't at this time had to make any contractual changes, but we would look to see what that would look like in 12 months' time. And then I mentioned here our engagement channels. We've got a Let's Chat series with the CEO where he meets individuals on a monthly basis. And so this was virtual, but it was really important during the time that people were out of the office, because it allowed, number one, them to get to know him, because he started just before we went into a COVID situation, and also gave employees an opportunity to get to know him and for him to get to know them. So it was really good. The employee forum it's a non-consultative forum, but it's representative of the employees in the office, and that gives our office-based workers an opportunity to give our direct feedback channel for the hybrid model, and certainly for when we went back during the rotational return as well. And so the feedback that comes through there allows us to understand, for example, if the COVID measures are appropriate, or whether we can do something more with them, or anything else that we need to look at. And so we understand that the hybrid model is going really well. And obviously one of the things which is back on the agenda through the employee forum is parking. We're a city-based company, so that's back on the agenda now, which we haven't heard about for a long time, but that was interesting. We also have this initiative called the Breakfast Club, where a member of our executive management team meets the randomly selected bunch of people from the organization to have a chat, no agenda, very informal, on a monthly basis for an hour, just one hour to chat about whatever is on their mind. And it's a good engagement initiative to, previously we had it on a virtual basis while we were off, but now we've obviously started again this month happily, and even introduced some breakfast, which was really nice. So we had in a socially distanced room, we had up to 10 employees talking to our CFO. We have an Ask Us HR Service Centre, and we did deliberate whether we reintroduce that at this time, because we want to minimise the traffic in certain areas, but we made it so that it was socially distanced, and that's where members of the HR team stand on each floor. We're lucky enough that our building is sizable, so we've got members of the HR team standing at particular points where they can talk to individuals and just check in, see how they're doing, and talk about anything that's on their mind, and also helps us to talk about any initiatives and programs that are ongoing. Of course, we also introduced a hybrid working guideline as well. And there's lots of information about that, which you can find in the CIPD. Okay. One of the things that we felt that was important to us was to have a renewed focus on well-being. Obviously, we have the usual benefits such as employee assistance program, we have a Medicash system, we have Cigna and such like, but we felt like we needed more focus. Well-being is obviously a state of being comfortable, healthy and happy, and something that we all need in our daily lives, and never more so than after the last 20 months. And also our 2020 employee engagement survey highlighted the importance of supporting well-being. And in response to this, we created a well-being strategy as part of the 2021 employee value proposition strategy. As our country emerged from the restrictions of the pandemic, concerns regarding mental health and well-being had never been greater. So it's really important to identify signs of mental health. So how did we address this? Well, with lots of employees saying that working remotely is great for their mental health, there are always risks to look out for. So we launched a mental wellbeing platform and an app, so moving with the times, to allow people to access a whole host of information and areas where they can be signposted for support. We also trained mental health first aiders. We launched a series called the Spotlight series, through which we talk openly about subjects that matter and allow our people to bring their full selves to the office and the workplace at home. So we spoke to people like Scott Bapty, he did a piece on, and all this was strategic in order to help people to, at the time, live with COVID, and also help them to come back and work within the hybrid option. We spoke to Scott Bapty about nutrition. We spoke with Caroline Taylor to talk to us. She's the head of mental wellbeing and resilience at International SOS. Talked to her about prioritising in a happy and healthy mind. We spoke to the gold Paralympic Neil Fahy, a local, about resilience and positivity in the face of adversity. We spoke to the Olympic rower Dame Catherine Granger about building resilience and courage. Caroline came back again and spoke to us about recognising and managing stress, and this was immediately in the lead up to returning to the office. Another matter which we found that it was really important to focus on was the menopause, and we had a lady called Jane Wilson, a really interesting lady to talk about the menopause, and that was well attended, so we're really pleased about that. A gen called Jeff McDonald told us about his own personal journey with mental health and his crusade where he wants to remove the stigma around it. It was really important to hear from him. We heard last month, or this month, should I say, from Laura Hearn talking about eating disorders, and next month we're going to hear from a gent called Jack Pridmore, who talks about living with obsessive compulsive disorder. So we're going to continue those throughout the time and throughout well into 2022. Physical well-being, obviously during COVID, you might have noticed that you have seen some of your colleagues, they might have changed, you might have changed yourself a little bit, because we've worked in a very different way during COVID. We've very much been focused on a screen. I mean, these type of events are very much focused on a screen. And so we've been sitting in one place for a long period of time. And obviously there were restrictions with COVID as well. So as a team, we worked with those restrictions and we tried to encourage people on a virtual basis to maintain their fitness. And we continue that throughout 2022 as well. So that's just an example of some of the things that we've done. Also, it's important just to remember that we have a duty of care to home workers. So we are required to make sure that they assess their home workstation, and we make any reasonable adjustments in order to support them to work from home, especially if we have a hybrid model. We've also encouraged leaders, and as part of their training, and I'll talk about that shortly, to encourage their employees to take a lunch break and try and avoid scheduling meetings over lunchtime. Seems like a natural thing to do, but it's funny how people forget. And here, I guess, role modeling really matters. So it's important for leaders to do that as well. Also, it's important to give employees the opportunity to disconnect, switch off and recharge. routine emails or calling outside set working hours needs to be managed. We found that that happened and started to creep in, but unfortunately that may lead to burnout for people. So we saw that it's important to manage that. So we asked our leaders to support us in managing that. Also, any emails sent outside of those times should be delayed to deter off-duty staff from continually checking their inbox. I mean, personally, I found it much easier to go and check on emails when I was working from home, whereas when you leave the office, you leave the office. So psychologically, there is a good disconnect, and even the journey home can help you to disconnect from work. But as we work from home over the last 20 months or so, we have found that work has entered our home space as well, and that has presented some problems for individuals as well. So that's where it's important to have that balance. And let's not forget, adapting our social well-being is very important to focus on that. Over the last 20 months or so, we've missed the important social functions in the office, and I guess many of us didn't understand how much we missed it until we actually went back. Through I mentioned earlier, the HR service centres, the Ask Us centres, we found that many people were coming up to us and explaining that I was really apprehensive, I was really anxious, I was really concerned, yet I feel great. It feels great to be back. My apprehensions, my concerns, my anxieties were not realised because it was more the psychological aspect of returning, and the impact that I felt, or what I might have imagined, hasn't actually realized. And it's just so great to see our buddies again, our office buddies. We're social animals, so it's really important for us to ensure that we allow some of the social functions in the office as well. I've just put some considerations in here, but for us, we saw that a phased approach to starting the hybrid model was important. So we started by having a rotational return, and then in early October, we all went back on a hybrid model. Although actually what I have found is that there are many people who decide to still work on a 5-day-week basis because they absolutely want to disconnect home from work. So, but the good thing is that the option is there for individuals to work the hybrid model, or work permanently or full-time in the office. And then obviously we've got some folks who are on a flexible working pattern as well. So having worked remotely for a considerable amount of time, the workforce has adapted working practices accordingly, and most tasks are accomplished and most meetings run effectively without having to be in the office. But going to the office has never just been about work, and technology won't make socializing less dependent on direct interpersonal contact anytime soon. Personal interaction helps people to build trust, learn the nuances of their job, and share what we call the water cooler moment. We'll have heard that a lot recently. So we also recommend leaders where possible to use the anchor days. So that's the Monday and Wednesday where we all have to be in the office for frequent in-person interactions to promote commitment, or even try and get some commitment, support, cooperation, and even start building the trust again, which might have been eroded somewhat whilst people have been working from home. So, and this one is, for the last 20 months or so, many of us found either ourselves being told or ourselves telling others, you're on mute. I would be surprised if it's not written on t-shirts and being sold for Christmas. But for around 20 months or so, video conferencing largely replaced face-to-face meetings. So it allowed employees based in different offices to work together. But the limited body language available in video conferences can trigger misinterpretation and make bonding very difficult, especially when people have their cameras off. So we took the decision to ask people to re-engage and actually, so when they are working from home during their hybrid model, and indeed for any other model they're working in the office, we asked them to turn on their cameras. just to try and encourage a connection. If you're in the office, you can't not go to meetings ordinarily. So we're trying to encourage people to re-engage and to have their cameras turned on. We've all adopted some interesting behaviors throughout the time that we've been working from home. So, and again, I spoke earlier about don't underestimate the transition to office working. Personally, I've been in a meeting last week where one of my colleagues said, wow, it's like we're still working from home, but our behaviors still reflect that, but we're still not used to actually being at in-person meetings. So there is a period of time, a transition to change our behaviors to working in an office space and obviously going to meetings again. So for any individual who said, and we certainly haven't had any challenge on it, that it may be invasive, we use Microsoft Teams, for example, and individuals can select a background as well, available on Microsoft Teams. So I talk here about the value of the human moment. So what's that? It's a short meetup at a colleague's desk, the ability to be able to turn around and ask a question, having formal meetings or time in your diary where you have to meet with people. It takes up a lot of time working from home. But the good thing about being in the office is it offers you the human contact. You can pick up on the non-verbal cues as well. So which you can't typically pick up on in a call, and it's more important to have the face-to-face encounters for the emotional and the human connection as opposed to over a screen. And so we ask managers to address that as much as possible and try and push the human moments as much as they can, and not certainly close their door and having an open door policy. When communication takes place remotely, the connection can be weakened, and it's like I say, it's harder to pick up those non-verbal cues. Yeah, and what I found being back in the office certainly is as well with the hybrid model is that people are more likely to help each other if they're sitting around each other or in meetings than they might have been working remotely and through screens. And so we felt that we had to put considerable amount of time helping our leaders to work with hybrid. So we prepared a leader awareness training, which focused on encouraging leaders to support reconnection. It is a change for leaders, for themselves to have to work in a hybrid model, and also to help to lead and support things that have changed the usual programs that we deal with, performance management, capability management and such like. We have to think about it in a different way and really think about what's appropriate and how you support people, and again to allow time for that transition, to allow them to thrive and to allow them to continue to have that level of autonomy that they might have had while working from home. The good thing is it was 100% participation and it went down really well. So that's just some feedback that we got on the basis of that training. Again, we spoke to leaders about role modeling and the importance of encouraging them to model the kind of social behaviors when they're in the office, encourage them to model the kind of social behaviors that their people ought to engage in. They shouldn't spend, like I mentioned earlier, all their time in meetings and should make themselves available to their teams. We also asked them to limit the number of in-person meetings so that the anchor day doesn't become a day of meetings. It's about striking the right balance, obviously, and involve activities that they mightn't do so easily at home, such as brainstorming, standing up and moving around a table. We also encourage them to ensure that when people come to the office, they feel they should have permission to connect or reconnect with their colleagues, new employees' cases to connect. And as well as explicitly stating that they should reinforce it by themselves spending time in the common areas and by having, as I mentioned earlier, an open door policy. Meetings are important, of course, but not more so than the human moments, as I mentioned earlier, because it's a relationship, not merely acts of collaboration that create trust between co-workers. We also asked them to consider how the anchor days can be used effectively. And if coming back in means only individual work and task focused meetings, the positive lessons from the pandemic will have been lost. And we also encourage them to host a one-to-one with their teams to check in with them. And that should be a focus on general well-being rather than a performance-based chat. And so one particular group that I mentioned there, and an area that we felt that needed a bit of work when we came back and entered the hybrid model, is supporting new employees. They may have had a really surreal experience and lost out on the informal and tangible benefits of sitting together in the office, and may not have profited from the spontaneous learning, as I said earlier, turning around and asking a question, or even listening to what's going on around you, and the creativity that comes from the human-to-human contact. New employees learn as much from observing their colleagues and managers and interacting with the various stakeholders they work with, as they did from going through the new employee orientation, if not more. So they missed out on that during the last 20 months or so. So we felt that it's important to focus on that and make sure that we help as much as we can. New employees learn the correct and proper way to behave, how things are done around here from directly observing those around them, especially their mentors. So we asked leaders, and we encourage them to encourage their team members to buddy with new employees to support their understanding of the norms and how things work. And also we launched or implemented a mentoring scheme. So we asked them to remind the new employees about this. It's voluntary, but it's really important and a good way for new employees to find out, again, how things work around here. Personal interactions help people to build trust and learn the nuances of the job. So it's really important for new employees to get that focus as early as they can. So you'll be glad to hear I won't be talking for much more. And I mean, it's rarely common that I would run out of words, but I decided to wrap it up here and just give you some key tips from our perspective on the two workplaces. So from our perspective, it's always good to remind people and tell them what they should expect when they start the new hybrid model. It's good to offer training and provide an opportunity to give feedback. Feedback's important because what it will do, and certainly for us, is it'll help shape the model after the 12 months and certainly during the 12 months. And in fact, we've already made changes to the original model just to make sure that we're getting it right. And we'll do an annual survey that will be launched in November just to seek that feedback as well. But the typical and route in order to provide feedback is through the employee forum. Leadership training on the new model is important to support a successful implementation, because leaders don't necessarily have those skills in their toolbox. And so it's important to give them training and tools and techniques in order to help them set themselves and their teams up for success. As I mentioned earlier, it's really important not to underestimate the important social function of the office, and make sure that we allow time for the water cooler moments, the side conversations, to allow people to understand what the norms are in the office. We found that effective engagement and communication is key to a successful rollout, and it needed that commitment from the top down. We found also that role modeling really matters. So for leaders that to practice what they preach, I suppose. And it was really important for us to support employee well-being and give time and space to people to support a good transition and set them up, as I said, for success. And remember, one size doesn't fit all. We can't offer this to all our workers, but for office-based workers, it's an option that they can choose to adopt and work with over the 12 months. And we certainly encourage them to continually give us feedback. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions. If Jane, you see that there's anything or any individual would like to ask at this stage.
That's great, Audrey. Thanks very much. And see, we've got a hand up already and a question in the chat. So do please, either option, I think works for us. So I don't know if we can. I know Jude had put her question up, I think during the presentation. So I don't know if you can see that, Audrey. But Jude's asking, were there any surprises to you in what concerned people about returning to the office?
Well, we had a bit of time beforehand to get people's perspectives and views. Were there any surprises? Do you know what was surprising? Surprising to me. I wouldn't necessarily say a surprise to to my whole team. I couldn't speak for them, but I was surprised that individuals wanted more time to consider things like setting up services for dog walking and such like. I think a lot of people had gone into COVID and it was originally, you know, as we all thought, going to be for a few weeks, and it was a novelty and it was, you know, something new. And then as the months went on, it became something a bit more permanent, and people got used to that. And so it was surprising, I guess, for me that and because we communicated a lot and said, this is what we're going to do, and here's where we're going with it, that some folks weren't maybe prepared to go back to the office. And you know, we did, so we went back en masse in October, and I was surprised. It was well received, you know, and even people that came up and said, oh, actually, I was really, you know, resistant myself to coming back, and I was apprehensive. You know, I'm really glad I did it now, you know, just taking that step. And that's what I mentioned. Caroline Taylor did a good piece of work in supporting us to understand that that's okay. It's okay to feel like that. It's okay to take your time to come into the office, you know, and take a day before you come into the office, trial that travel time, trial having to put on your, you know, your uniform, your whatever you need to put on in order to get back into the office. But yeah, so some things were surprising. Yes.
Thanks, Audrey. I think maybe Sarah who's got a hand up, was next. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Jane. Hi, Audrey. Really, that was really informative. Thank you. My question is about the nature of the work that that people are doing in the office on those anchor days. I'm wondering if you're seeing a difference, or even encouraging different types of work between what people do at home and what people do at work, or in the office, let's say, because I can hear that you're trying to encourage that social interaction. I'm wondering if there is a difference between what people do on the home days and what people do on the office days.
Yes, we are seeing a difference in that a lot of in-person meetings are being held within a socially distanced area and meeting rooms and such like. So leaders are taking note and conducting those in-person meetings with their teams or groups of individuals, insofar as there are restrictions around it, and using that time to focus on meetings and brainstorming and just to make sure that they have those in-person moments as opposed to the task list, the to-do list. So we've encouraged that where people, so everyone is in on a Monday and Wednesday, that everyone is in the office, and then they pick their other day out of the remaining 3 working days. But during those days, we see a lot more meetings happening, a lot of engagement, a lot of social interaction in terms of and in terms of work activity. And so to leave, and we've encouraged, leave some of the task-based activity to working from home, where you might need, because, you know, we're back in the office now, and some of the usual things that are coming up, like someone has their phone on and their phone's making noise, you know, and it's just to allow, as I said earlier, that transition for people to get used to being back in the office again, and to allow them time to address and change their behaviors. So yeah, we've had some of that usual feedback that we might usually see, because we're also largely in an open plan environment. So, but yes, focus on meetings and more of the social stuff during the anchor days, and then whilst working from home, if they can, then focus on the task-based activities.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just returning back to the chat now. I see we've got a question here from Jamie. how have you helped manage expectations of those who just want to be in the office and those who only want to be at home, or was this not an issue?
Yeah, so we still, thank you for your question, Jamie. So we still have people who want to work in the office on a 5-day week basis, and that's okay. It's the hybrid model is an option, so it's one of a number of options. You can still continue to work in the office on a 5-day week, so that wasn't met with any resistance, and that's for individuals who simply like to disconnect their workplace from their home. And then for people who wanted to work on a full-time basis, we had some requests. We obviously have had some flexible working requests, which is an individual's right to request flexible working, subject to them having the level of service. And so what we found was generally individuals who didn't necessarily want to work full-time in the office, they may have had reasons where they might have required some reasonable adjustments. So we looked at any individual in that case based on their request on its individual merits. So yeah, but generally on the whole, people were, once they came back, happy to be back.
Thanks, Audrey. We've got another question here, this time from Nicola, asking about part-time workers and saying, how have you applied the hybrid model of 3 days in the office for part-time workers? If they work a 3-day week, are they expected to attend the office every day?
Oh, good question. Thank you, Nicola. So what we said for part-time workers, that we'd address those individuals, because we have got quite a few part-time workers, and we said where they can, they would work the anchor days. So for example, someone on a 3-day week, just using your example, that they could work the Monday and Wednesday if they work over a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we would prorata it for their working pattern. So yeah, we would make sure to treat them no less favorably than their full-time equivalent.
We're keeping you there. The group is keeping you working here, Audrey. There's more questions coming in, this time from Susan, asking about, have you experienced more job applicants asking for hybrid working?
Yes, we have. We found, and this was even leading up to going into the hybrid model, we found that more people are asking for the hybrid working model because, you know, essentially people could now live elsewhere and travel up for the 3 days, and you know, if they wanted to work a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we have got individuals who've actually moved elsewhere and come up and stay in Aberdeen for the 3 days, because obviously the Monday and Wednesday is mandatory for everyone to work, unless they have a flexible working arrangement or for some other reason. So yeah, we have found that it does allow us to, I guess, cast the net wider when it comes to recruitment. But yeah, it's worked in our favour. Yeah.
Possibly slightly linked question here, Audrey, not about applicants, but in terms of people kind of moving. A question here from Jane saying, have you had any issue with people moving outside the normal commuting distance and therefore not wanting to come in at all?
We have had a few individuals who've elected to move elsewhere outside of the commuting distance, but we've made it clear, I guess, that our policy is the hybrid policy or the hybrid option, as it were, is the Monday and Wednesday in the office. So they would have to, and the 3rd day as well. So they would have to make themselves available and in Aberdeen for that. And obviously we'd make exceptions where it's for medical reasons or other well-being reasons where it's appropriate. And as I said earlier, each case is reviewed on its own merits. But yeah, it's been a very, very tiny number of people. But yeah, it's happened.
So let's say there's a question in here from Katie this time. I think this is one I've certainly heard asked quite a few times, asking where there is a face-to-face meeting taking place in the office, and you've also got people who are dialing in remotely. Do you have any tips on how to ensure those colleagues dialing in don't feel excluded from the chat or the conversation?
So for us, we are generally recommending that meetings are held on the anchor days, so the Mondays and Wednesdays, and we still have during the other day meetings, and we find we're lucky enough that our technology is good enough to allow those meetings to happen with people dialing in as well. But it's just to be aware of allowing the individuals, say, who can't attend the office on those days, just to give them the time and space to make sure they get the opportunity to speak. But generally, they'll be working in the office on a Monday and Wednesday anyway. So we're just encouraging employees. And remember, we're only a month and a half in, so we're still finding our feet with it. But generally, it seems to be working well.
Thanks, Audrey. And question in here from Emma this time. Do you have an HR system in place that is showing employees are doing the minimum number of days required of them, or is it more based around line manager trust?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one we considered because obviously for us it's an option, the hybrid working model, and it's not contractual, as I mentioned earlier, because we're on a trial basis for 12 months. We'll review that again in 12 months time, or 12 months after we've implemented it, and consider where we want to go. But that will give us enough time to figure out if the model's right and whether we want to make any adjustments to it. But generally, what was the question again? Oh, that's really bad.
This was about
laugh at me, I can see it.
Yeah, this was asking about whether there was any HR system in place to kind of monitor that, or whether it was entirely based on trust.
Yeah. Well, we've asked our line managers to manage it and give them the autonomy and empower them to manage individuals who are working with the hybrid, but ensuring that they are in for the 3 days per week. We made it very clear that we do want individuals in on the Monday and Wednesday and a third day. So, and we haven't had any reports of any issues so far, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed because obviously we still returned, but we're still all living with COVID, but and thankfully again we haven't seen any issues across the offices, but we're fortunate enough to have office space where we have we're allowed, and we can offer social distancing. People still transit around the office with masks and such like as well. So we still have a risk assessment, and we regularly check that to make sure that we have the appropriate measures in line with COVID-19. But yes, it's leaders. Now we're leaving it for leaders to manage. We're not recording it in any system. We have no record I couldn't pull you a statistic. I would say around 95-96% of people are choosing to engage and opt for the hybrid model in the office, obviously.
Okay, Audrey, a question here from Sheila, and I'm not sure whether you're at the stage yet. Will you'd have a feel for this, but Sheila is asking, do you anticipate you'll need to make contractual changes when you implement this after the pilot? And I guess you kind of talked about that, but I don't know, maybe it's too early to have a sense of what those possibly might be.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jane. I don't think we're ready to anticipate what that would look like yet. And for now, we're on a trial. But if we did offer something on a permanent basis, of course, we would have to look at it from a contractual perspective.
Yeah, another question in here from Nicola. How do you know who has opted in? Did they have to submit anything?
It was a discussion with their line manager. We did consider whether we would ask individuals to fill in a form, but then we thought, what would we do with it? It's for a 12-month trial basis. So we don't want to create more work for people, and certainly for the individuals to sign up for that. And there's no requirement to record something for ourselves during the 12-month period. We've got a great idea because we engage well with our leaders to know that individuals in their team are choosing to take up the hybrid option, and we can certainly tell it by the car parking spaces on a Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, actually. So yeah, that's why car parking is now an issue for us, because it's been difficult to try and assess how we allocate car parking on the days where individuals, so on the Monday and Wednesday it would be business as usual, but the Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, there would obviously be more spaces. So it's a bit of a task, and I'm glad I'm not in facilities, to try and work out how to allocate those spare spaces. So they're still doing a piece of work to try and analyze what that looks like in order to determine what change they would make to that policy for those days.
Yeah, I guess it just illustrates just how many issues there actually are, and things you maybe, aren't initially focusing on then become issues later on.
And then those were issues pre-COVID, I would say. Car parking, it's always a hot topic, but it's interesting to see that we've gone back to that. But I understand it's what's important to the individual.
Okay, Jude's asking a question here. Do you require staff to do lateral flow tests?
So what we say is we do, as in we ask them where there might be symptoms or signs of COVID, that they do take the right tests and whatever tests that are available to them. We also put out a communication to our staff last week or the week before, where individuals are getting the usual seasonal illnesses such as colds and flus, and we ask them to remain at home because they have that provision and set up to work from home. So we're asking them now not to come in when they might have symptoms of cold, flu, or indeed COVID, and to make sure that they take lateral flow tests if they believe that they have or they've come into contact and such. Like, we followed the government guidelines with that.
Thanks, Audrey. A question here from Katrina this time, saying, whilst your hybrid model is a pilot, do you envisage including the model in your job adverts to attract talent in the future?
Oh, it's a good question. I should probably ask our lead recruiter that, David, but I don't know. I imagine we will, because as I mentioned earlier, it's part of our wider employee value proposition strategy. So obviously EVP feeds right into the recruitment side. So it absolutely would be important, because work environment's part of that strategy. It's one of the pillars that we'd be telling people that we do offer hybrid working as an option, and explain what that means in reality.
Question in here from Natalia this time. Did you experience any reluctance from the leadership or the management team against the hybrid model and wanting their team to go back to the old normal?
Oh, that's a good question. If you asked me that at the beginning of 2020, when the survey said we want flexibility, and we largely had a different management team at the time, or senior management team. And when I went along and I told them the results of the survey, and this is obviously pre-COVID, it was met with some resistance, although at the time there were 3 key teams in the organization that were already trialing a hybrid-esque model, so working from home and working in the office. And so at the time, I remember telling them about adopting or adapting to a formal model. So it was probably met with more resistance than actually I probably expected that. But fast forward 20 months on, no, it wasn't met with resistance. No, actually, we've got quite an, I would say, open-minded and progressive senior management team and leaders. So no, it was met with not with resistance. They're very happy with having a model. And I don't know, I think it was maybe Katrina mentioned or someone else that mentioned, did we make sure that we included in our recruitment? It's really good as part of our employee value proposition. So, and what you do get, and I think that the blend or the hybrid model will offer is goodwill from employees and such like. So we're seeing that already.
A question in here from Danielle this time, saying, are there any exceptions to the full remote working? I.e., could somebody, has it opened up scope for applicants that may be based elsewhere from the main office, for example?
From external applicants in terms of recruitment, do you mean, or? Maybe Danielle wants to.
Yeah, I think it's applicants. Yeah, maybe Danielle. I don't want to second guess the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry. It would be applicants, I think, because I think it's like broaden the scope for, it's great for you know, somebody looking for a job and actually you're able to remote work or hybrid work. But I was just wondering if you've noticed any exceptions to the rule for fully remote working. Me myself, I'm actually based in Scotland, but my office are based in Manchester, so I'm really, really lucky that I'm given the opportunity, and I've not got that pressure to come into the office at least like once a week or so, if that makes sense. So I was just wondering what you guys have experienced.
So thanks, Danielle. Thank you for your question, and thanks for explaining it as well. So for us, we've been very clear that our model, or you know, the hybrid option, we would still want people to be in on the Monday and Wednesday. So that's the option that works for us, because we value the human side, the social side, the need for a reduction in silos. In the past, you know, whatever, 20 months, let's say, there's been, you know, your network would have been much smaller during that time than it would be when you're back in the office, because you're dealing with people on a task base. You may, you know, you wouldn't have the opportunity to stumble into people, and not stumble, and certainly not with social distancing, but in the office, and have that water cooler moment. So where your network can obviously widen and increase, but you find your network might have shrunk during that time. So we wanted to make sure that we did have people in the office on set days, to make sure we opened up those opportunities again. And we, you know, help brainstorming with the departments. We help the new employees to get to know each other, and obviously their colleagues. So our model is very much, you're in the office on a Monday and Wednesday, unless obviously there are mitigating circumstances, you know, or unless there are any reasonable or any adjustments required.
Thanks, Audrey. A question from me this time, if I may. You've talked about well-being quite a lot in your presentation.
Yeah.
Have you done any research looking at kind of the productivity impact? I mean, you talked about people coming into the office and collaboration and supporting new employees, etc. And I'm thinking of those days when the non-anchor days, are people doing very much more individual work, or has there been any kind of weighing up of what people are doing or how they're spending their time, or any kind of a feel for what impact this is having on productivity?
Yeah, I mean, generally what's being reported, and obviously this is coming in through their leaders and such like, and we're early days for us, but we should get more when we listen to the employee forum on the 18th of this month and get some feedback. We continually receive feedback through them, but for now, generally people are reported to come in on the Mondays and Wednesdays, that they really focus on the meetings and not the social side. We're there to work, obviously, but you know, making sure that they have that connection with their colleagues. But on the other days is very much focusing on the tasks and getting the work done, as well as the anchor days. But no, we're not measuring that per se.
That's great. Thanks, Audrey. You've actually got through all the questions, and we're actually, I don't think we could have got a better timed event in terms of the fact we're right on 7 o'clock now. I mean, I'd just like to say I think it's been an absolutely fascinating session, and I think the number and the breadth of different types of questions that you have so ably answered demonstrates everybody's interest in the topic and interest in learning what you've done at Repsol Sinopec. I think you'd said to me just before we started that you're the first operator to have actually adopted such a model. So it's I'm sure there are many watching and interested in learning from your experiences.
So I think we're one of the first in terms of like en masse to go back to this type of model, but others will be doing it with variations. But for our hybrid model, which is the Mondays and Wednesdays and the third day, we should, we're a month or so in, so we'll see how it goes. Happy to report back.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you also to Shona, who I know who has behind the scenes set everything up for us and helped get everybody successfully admitted. Also, Shona will be sending out a survey to you. It'll come out automatically just shortly. So we'd really appreciate your thoughts both on this event, or indeed if you've got any suggestions or ideas for for future events as well. We're always really interested in learning what people would like to hear about. So I could just say thanks very much to Audrey.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the great questions as well. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.